No. Well, I know. I think we're two. It's nice to sit down for a minute. I think it must have something to do with the distance from front and behind, maybe. Yeah, but you are too close.
Good night and good night. Good evening and welcome. Yeah, that's it. Welcome to this evening's pre-meeting briefing session. Just to let you know that it's being audio recorded for administrative purposes, and by speaking at the pre-meeting briefing session, you agree to be being recorded. Please ensure that if and when you are speaking at this meeting that you are respectful to other people and use appropriate language. Albury City accepts no liability for any defamatory or offensive remarks or gestures made during the course of this pre-meeting briefing session. Apologies. We have apologies from Councillor Mack, Councillor Con, Councillor Cameron, and also Deputy CEO Brad Ferris. I have not received any conflict of interest declarations, and there are none. So the first item on this evening's agenda is the Committees and Working Parties Register update. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you. Okay, tonight we're going to work through our Committees and Working Parties Register, annual review and update of memberships and representation. Okay, so the document provides an overview of Albury City Committees and Working Parties for 2020-21. Councillors annually resolve their membership or representations on various committees and working parties, hence why we're sitting here tonight to work through that process. Councillors were asked to indicate which committees and working parties they wish to continue serving on, or those they would like to be considered for appointment to should a vacancy arise. Service leaders were also asked recently to update the register to confirm staff membership of some committees and working parties or any other changes required. An example of that is changes to any titles that may need updating. Can you hear me now if I speak into it? Is that a bit better? Okay, so the purpose of this presentation is to confirm to the extent where we can councillor representation on various Albury City committees and working parties, as we just spoke about. Our report will be presented to the council meeting on Monday the 26th, which is next week, with the draft register of committees and working parties, with changes represented in tracked changes. Where there is greater interest than there are positions available, the matter may need to be put to a vote at the council meeting. Those committees and working parties for which memberships are to be determined, there's 3 of them we need to discuss tonight, of which the first one will be the EIO Community Board of Trustees. So from the review and work that we did with councillors prior to tonight, what we found is that Councillor Stutchbury is currently on the Board of Trustees as a director, however has indicated to us that he is happy to be replaced in that position. We have had 2 councillors have expressed interest in representing Albury City should a vacancy arise, and those councillors are Councillors Vanderven and Councillor Doxey. What we'd like to do now is just open up some...
Sorry, through you, Mr Chair, I withdraw my interest in that nomination. Thank you.
Okay. So based on that feedback, given that we have now Councillor Doxey as the only remaining councillor who has expressed interest, I think that should be a replacement for Councillor Stutchbury.
Congratulations, Councillor Doxey. You're going to love it. We'll report that to the Chair for your
Got it. Yep. So as we are not making decisions here tonight, what we will do is represent that change into the council meeting report next week, and we'll push it through for that decision to be made next week. So thank you, Councillor Doxey. Okay. So our local traffic committee. Current council representatives are Councillor Doxey and Stutchbury, and Councillor Glacken has indicated that she is happy to remain as a substitute for those positions. So both Councillor Doxey and Stutchbury have expressed that they would like to remain as a representative for this committee. Two other councillors have expressed interest in representing Albury City on this committee, being Councillors Doxey and Stutchbury. So what we'd like to do... Oh, sorry, Councillors Vanderven and King, sorry. Makes more sense. So what we'd like to do is just open up some conversation now around the councillors that we have sitting on the committee at this stage and those councillors who have expressed interest.
I'm happy to stand down.
Okay.
I think I've been there for 7 years.
Thanks, Councillor Doxey. Okay, so with that remaining, we have Councillors Vanderven and Councillor King with one position to be replaced.
It's my intention to stay on the committee if possible.
Mm-hmm. Which is fine. So we'll just reflect that information in the report and pop that up to the council meeting next week. Okay, and our third one is Parklands Albury Wodonga Limited. So a vacancy has arisen in relation to this external entity. In accordance with the Articles of Association, council is entitled to nominate a person to be director of the board. It is each councillor's individual choice as to whether they wish to be an executive on this outside entity. So Councillor Con has stepped away from that role. So just confirming here that this is an outside entity, an external entity to Albury City. So it really would be a voluntary position that you would be taking up should you wish to replace Councillor Con.
Councillor Con did approach me and asked me would I step up to that one. I think I've been the substitute for some time. I've been to 1 or 2 meetings, so I'm happy to do that.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley.
And would a substitute need to be, is it a director, or would they be just a substitute? And if there is any other interest in that, I presume we would need a substitute. I don't know. Through you to the most relevant member of staff.
Yeah, thank you for the question, and through you, Mr. Chair. For that, I'm not quite sure. I might need to take that question on notice.
And perhaps we can deal with that at the actual meeting once you've got that determination for us.
Thank you.
Okay.
We'll provide some of that information in the report.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay, so that is the end. We only had to work through the 3 tonight, so thank you for your time.
Thank you, Kate. Next item is Councillors' payment of expenses and provision of facilities policy review, and that is you, Kate. Thank you.
Thank you again. Okay, tonight we are going to be talking through a review of the payment of expenses and provision of facilities policy. So we are up for review around this particular policy. And the purpose of this presentation is to present some suggested changes for this particular policy. I'd like to take you through 6 key areas of the policy and some proposals for review, action or change. We're taking into account your feedback about the policy through this session and through informal means, but we'll also be referring to the results of the counsellor survey that we undertook in August of this year, where some feedback provided and received by some counsellors will inform some of the suggestions that we're going to make through our presentation tonight. So the 6 key areas that we'd like to go into a little bit more detail are around devices and data, our on-site facilities, meals and catering, professional development opportunities, Albury City's panel of conduct reviewers, and recognition of service for counsellors.
Do you have a question, Councillor Doxey?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Kate, can you confirm that in August, when we were requested to provide responses for a survey, that 6 out of 9 councillors responded? Is that correct?
Thank you for the question. Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, that is correct. We
Thank you.
received 6 responses. Okay, so the first area in relation to devices and data. Our current policy suggests that appropriate monthly data and call allowance in order to undertake counsellor business for tablets and smartphones. What we'd like to do is make a suggestion around removing appropriate allowance, as has been raised recently in relation to providing some explanation around what is appropriate in terms of that allowance for data for our counsellors to support our counsellors to undertake their work. What we'd like to do is suggest that we remove that word appropriate allowance and just open up some conversation here tonight just to understand what counsellors' needs are for data usage and data allowance for you to undertake your role as counsellor. So we have, just to get the conversation going, we have had some advice from our IT area, just to form a bit of thinking around what might appropriate look like in terms of supporting you to undertake your role. And we also wanted to understand in terms of our allowance, Albury City's contract with our service provider, how we could accommodate supporting the counsellor group within the maximum capacity that we have. And what our IT area have suggested is somewhere in the range of 15 gigabyte to 20 gigabyte per counsellor on a monthly basis would seem to be a reasonable amount. However, we're more than happy to have that conversation here tonight just to understand if that may suit your need. You may require more, you may require less. But when we looked into the data that it takes to download your papers each month, if you are zooming into council meetings, IT have provided that level of detail for us.
Thank you, Kate. I have some questions. Councillor Glacken.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair, to the most relevant member of staff. It'd be good to know, and perhaps it might be possible to feed back to all of us, what the range is that councillors have been using, so the minimum, maximum, average per month for download that we've been using to date, but also what we individually have been using to date, and if it was possible to get that over, a 6-month spread, because some months we might be using more than others. And the interesting fact to me, or the interesting point for me, is that when I get home, this hops onto my internet and it uses my download, which I'm happy to have happen, but it just bumps up my family use. And because I have been, in the last 9 months, working primarily from home, that means that this is primarily using my family data as opposed to what council data would be. So I think it's first question is, what is our average use, etc. But 2, and it might be we have to look back a year's 18 months to 12 months ago for what would be a normal pattern? And then how would we deal with the current situation where most of us would be using our home data?
Sure. So thank you for the question through you, Mr. Chair. I'm not in a position to be able to answer that tonight, not having an IT background or exposure to that information. So what I can do is refer back to our IT area so that we can start to get a little bit more of an understanding around what does average look like. And as you've suggested, average when we're not working through COVID-19 and having predominantly some working from home. So we will run that average out over a 12-month period to see what a pattern looks like. But sure, I can report that information back.
If we get some guide, that'd be fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Black. And just echoing that, I've only been contacted in the last 4 years twice by admin. Both times were to say that I'd gone over some data limit, but I've never been contacted at any other time to say that I'd gone under a data limit or indeed what the data limit was. So I would echo that Councillor Blacken has asked a fairly reasonable question there. We have another question now from Councillor Thurley, please.
It's pretty much along the same lines, Mr. Chair. We really do need the data. I mean, on the Murray-Darling Association, we've been holding all our meetings by Zoom. I'm on the Basic Community Committee and I use this device to do that. My household data usage has not changed. I'm still paying a flat fee. So I have not extended, the cost to my personal cost hasn't gone up, but it would just be good to know what the range of data usage is and whether then we need to make any changes to this policy. So.
Thanks, Councillor Thurley. Now a question from Councillor Murray King.
Hi, Kate. Just in relation to the phones, I don't have a council phone, and I don't think a lot of the other councillors have council phones. Do we have a run around the room that who uses their own phone and who uses their council phone?
I'll use my own.
My own.
I use a
Council.
I have my council number diverted to my own phone.
Yeah.
On my own phone. I can't be bothered carrying two phones.
A big organisation like the Albury City Council, surely we'd have like a huge bit of pull with Telstra or whoever our provider is, that there'd nearly be unlimited data, as people's stuff at home is unlimited. Do we have that facility to go back to them and say we want unlimited and we wouldn't have to worry about this?
Thank you for the question through you, Mr. Chair. I am aware that we don't have an unlimited plan. And that's the extent that I'm able to provide that level of detail. I'm sorry, Councillor King, it's not an area of my expertise, but I am aware that we don't have an unlimited plan. I know that there has been some work in that space to understand what would the costs associated with moving to an unlimited plan look like, but I'm not in a position to be able to provide an answer to that tonight. I apologise.
That's all right. Yep.
I have a question from Councillor Van der Ven.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just a quick one from my perspective. I think I argued for this quite a few years ago in terms of, getting reimbursed for using your own wireless internet and those sorts of things. But in terms of where we are today in the comparison of what the cost is today for a gigabyte of data compared to what it was 7 years ago, I'm talking, I think we're unfortunately at home, all of my devices go to my Wi-Fi and it's slower than, I can't believe how slow it is, but that's the only option I've got because it's an NBN satellite service. But I think I pay $60 a month for I think it's currently 100 gigabytes. So we're talking $5 or $6 a month for usage of council stuff. We get 24 grand a month, a year in allowance, and I sort of stopped carping about this on the basis of the cost. In my view, is infinitesimal in terms of where we were 7 or 8 years ago. So I don't really care one way or the other.
Thank you, Councillor Van der Ven. And Councillor Doxey, you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just an observation. I have 2 phones. I'm happy to use the council phone and separate that from my personal phone. When I go out at night, I don't take the council phone with me. I don't want to be getting interrupted when I don't need to be. I'm happy with that. 2 pockets, 2 phones. In the 8+ years that I've been using council iPads, I've never had an issue in relation to the data I use. And my data I use on the council one is purely for council functions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Doxey. Please continue, Kate.
Thank you. There will also be a recommended change to include reference to Albury City's general IT policies around acceptable usage. So what we're referring to there is what you can and can't use your devices for. So that particular aspect is actually missing out of the current policy now. So that will be a recommended change that we'll be making.
I can't use the account on the council iPad. Hey? Oh, goodness.
Thank you, Councillor Van der Ven.
Okay, so moving on to our on-site facilities. The feedback that we received is that our mayoral suite, the decor contained within the mayoral suite is somewhat dated. We also received feedback around the councillor meeting room. The survey indicated a preference to have tea and coffee facilities in this room on offer for the occasions where you have external participants in meetings. So our suggestions here are that we will commence a process to explore options for refreshing the decor within the mayoral suite, and we'll provide some recommendations, including costings, once we've undertaken that process. And we're also researching options for equipment in the meeting room to ensure it meets requirements. So when we talk about tea and coffee, depending on what type of facilities you're looking for, whether that is a kettle with some tea and coffee situated in the meeting room, or whether it's more of an actual coffee machine as an example. So obviously the costings will vary greatly between those 2 options outlined.
Thank you, Kate. Yes, certainly my preference would be for a coffee machine rather than a kettle, but I guess it depends on how the budget's going. We do have a question from Councillor Van der Ven.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. How many times does the meeting room get used for people to meet, or councillors to meet with external people in the last, let's say the last 12 months? Do you have that information available?
Thank you for the question. And through you, Mr. Chair, I do have that information available. Over the last 12 months, we have something, I'm just looking for the information here in front of me, 14 times in a 12-month period.
We don't need a coffee machine under those circumstances. Well,
I'm pretty sure.
well,
I'm pretty sure we're not allowed to make a decision here, councillors.
well, no, I'm
Van der Ven
suggesting
and
suggesting that we don't need a coffee machine, nor a kettle, for that matter.
Thank you, Councillor Van der Ven. There is a question or comment from Councillor Doxey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a comment of those 14, 4 of those are meetings that I'm a part of, which are Clubs New South Wales. And we hit the room for 30 minutes and we don't go into the other room. We don't take bickies or anything at all. We don't need it.
Thank you for that, Councillor Doxey. Please continue, Kate.
Okay, moving across to meals and catering. So our current policy Suggests meals on evenings of council meetings, community forums and councillor workshops will be made available. Our feedback was generally positive about catering from 2640 restaurant across the road. Our executive support staff will review catering arrangements in January 21 or earlier if COVID-19 restrictions ease. So unless there's any other feedback around that.
Thank you, Kate. We have some feedback from Councillor Doxey. Let's hope it's not about biscuits.
No biscuits. I think we need to just vary the menu a little bit over there. It's becoming very much same. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment. What we can also do is maybe look at some other providers as well in the local area, taking into consideration the ease of having to walk across the road to 2640. There may be some other options that we can explore should they not wish to change their menu upon request.
And a question or comment from Councillor Blacken.
Thank you. I think it's the proximity is fantastic and one of the key factors. And it's just the 5 things are on the menu. If they could offer us another 5 or change 3 every 2 months or something like that, that would be fantastic. Yeah, but clearly location is almost everything is my comment. Thank you.
And of course, everything should be healthy, nutritious and high fibre. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you. Okay, on to, hit the button too quickly. Let's go back one. It's a bit too zippy. Okay, moving on to professional development. So our policy indicates council will pay for training and short courses specifically related to the role of a counsellor. Our identified areas for review and change is amending the policy to specifically reference the obligations in the Local Government Act and regulations around professional development for counsellors, so being a little bit more specific in that space. The Act indicates that the General Manager will deliver induction and ongoing professional development programs that will help mayors and councillors to acquire and maintain the skills necessary to perform their roles. So we'll just change, recommendation is to change the policy to include that level of detail. And also some councillors recently attended training on Docs on Tap, our software application for council meetings, business papers. This was in direct response to feedback received through the survey. We have had some feedback from councillors who did attend that training that it was quite a positive experience for them, and more than happy to continue to offer that, that level of support to any other councillor who may require it.
Thank you, Kate. A couple of questions. First from Councillor Doxey.
I've been lumbering along for 8 years asking for a speed reading opportunity. Probably a bit late now, but don't chew your glasses, Frank. Don't chew your glasses. If we look at that at some stage, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you for the feedback, Councillor Doxey. One thing I will mention is that the Local Government New South Wales has a capability framework provided specific to councillors, and with the move in the people and culture team with our professional development and our organisational development program, we will be looking to further explore this capability framework that's on offer for councillors. So there will be some work undertaken in that space, and we'll report back through to you.
Thank you, Kate. There is a question from Councillor King, but I'll just make a simple observation before we move to Councillor King. We've all now been here for 4 or many more years than 4. And so I don't think at the present moment any of us need a tutorial on anything specific, but certainly when new councillors start, they ought to get specific training, probably in the sort of the the hot button territories of planning, I would suspect, would be a good one. I seem to recall we got a couple of lessons on how to behave as councillors, but maybe we got something on planning, but I might have. Was that night we had the 96 slide PowerPoint presentation? I'm pretty sure that was on planning. But anyway, I digress. There's a question from Councillor King.
Yes, firstly, an observation. So if new councillors come on board, would actually to run some mock councils, so they get a bit of a handle on how it all works, so rather than get thrown into the deep end and made look like an idiot, which I can identify. And also the docs on tap for the, it's a really antiquated system. We continue to bang on about it. We've been here 4 years. It was around probably when the last council on. Councils are still getting training on it. So for 4 years, they haven't been able to master it to its professional, to its probably intended use. So I would think that we have a bit of a look around to see if there's an easier type of thing that you can access from not necessarily a device, but some other device that you can put your code word in and read docs on tap without having, maybe your phone and whatever the new docs on tap is, just to make it easier that if you don't have your iPad, something comes through, you can go and check on it. You might be able to do it now, I don't know, but I find it cumbersome and old and worn out.
Thank you, Councillor King. Your question has evaporated, Councillor Glacken.
I won't labour the point that it's not really that an older product and it's had a number of reiterations. So leave it.
Thank you. Feedback taken on board. Okay, advisory services of a conduct reviewer. So our clause 8 in our policy indicates that councillors can access the informal advisory service of the nominated conduct reviewer by telephone. Council will select this nominated conduct reviewer for the term of the council from the council's panel of conduct reviewers. So our current arrangement for panel providers is in place until June 21. We'll work with Ramjo to determine whether the arrangement is to be extended for a period of 12 months to allow the incoming council in September 21 to determine the next panel of reviewers. And feedback will be sought from the councillor group in early 21 regarding the current panel. So through the survey, we were unable to form a view as to the awareness of the availability of the conduct reviewer for early, informal advice and the uptake of that service. So essentially bringing this to your attention now, just to generate some conversation as to whether or not there is that awareness there. And then if there's not that awareness, to bring it to your attention, and then also just if there's any feedback around that service that you might like to provide.
Thank you, Kate. I myself certainly was not aware that we could telephone someone and ask them these questions. So thank you for that. And Councillor Van der Ven has a question or comment.
Yeah, just a comment through you, Mr. Chair. To be quite honest, my view is that the whole code of conduct provisions are toothless tiger, absolute waste of time. We need to actually sit down and provide some feedback to the New South Wales government about the code of conduct, the whole code of conduct issue. And obviously from there, I don't think the code of conduct reviewers need changing. I just think that the whole code of conduct scene needs a total overhaul because it's just a complete and utter waste of time.
Thank you, Councillor Van der Ven. I guess that there's always the possibility that if we councillors all behaved ourselves, we wouldn't need any code of conduct. But you know, that's just me dreaming. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you. And lastly, our recognition of counsellor service. So this is not presently covered in our policy, but it's something that has been brought up in terms of feedback from the survey that we undertook in August. So other councils that we're aware of, some other councils do recognise council service, and we, out of the responses received in the survey, was evenly split. 3 councillors suggesting they would like to move down this path to include, and 3 saying no. So if we move off the back of the 3 that have suggested that they'd like to include this in the policy, what we've provided here is just a couple of suggestions around what recognition could look like. Acknowledgement at a meeting, a dinner, a gift or a certificate, and should the value of gifts be commensurate with the length of service. So it's just to open up, if the councillors sitting in the room tonight, if we just could further explore whether or not this is something that you'd like to look into, given the even split 3-3, and the suggestions that we've popped up there, if there's any comments around those.
Thank you, Kate. First comment is going to be Councillor Thurley.
Well, it needs to be at least 2 terms of council. I mean, you get on here, you're here for 4 years. If we're going to recognise that, it just becomes trivial. If you serve on council as Councillor Gould did for how many, 52 years? 42. She was recognised by the Minister for Local Government and so on. That's an appropriate way to do it. I can just imagine the complete uproar in the community if we vote ourselves a dinner, a gift or something. Acknowledgement of meeting is more than enough.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley, and I'd have to say I concur. I mean, none of us were forced into this role, except perhaps for me, when I received a phone call one Friday evening when I had 1 or 2 too many stubbies. So we all do it because we either want to do it or think that it's worth doing, and I don't think that we should be given a gold watch at the end of 4, 8, 16 or 44 years. If we didn't want to do it, we'd just pack it in and do something else on Monday nights. Now, there's some further comments. There's Councillor Glacken.
Thank you. I think some form of certificate that is more along the lines of the certificate you can gain from a university. And I agree with more than the, at least the second term. And so some form of nice certificate, like a university graduation certificate, or the certificate that doctors are given and the dates put on there. And it might be that if, in the case of Councillor Gould, we would have given maybe a PhD type version of a certificate, as opposed to the Bachelor of Council, etc. They're just my thoughts.
Thank you.
But that might be a nice way to deal with it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Glacken. I'm pretty sure I've got my primary certificate absolutely confirmed, but whether or not I get a high school one or not, I don't know. The issue with certificates, of course, is that all of these terms actually mean something. So if you receive a certificate, then you're certified for something. And so after 4 or 8 or 16 years on council, I'm not sure what one could be certified for, but the imagination runs wild.
I'll rephrase and call it a notice of recognition of service.
That sounds good. Yeah, a laurel and hearty handshake. Now there is a question or comment from Councillor King.
Probably some feedback. What does the council staff get after increments of service? Might be commensurate with what you look at here if you're going to do it.
Thank you for that question. I might have to defer to Frank on that one. Recognition of service. If you've got a level of understanding of that one?
Yes, thank you. Thanks for the question. So 5, 10, 15, 20 years of the service recognition, and in more recent times, a gift card to a certain value in recognition is where we've landed with in consultation with the staff rather than gifts per se. The certificates of recognition that or service that the Local Government Association have issued over the journey for mayoral service, councillor service, I think it's over 2 terms, that they're certainly available in recognition of councillor service. So it is service recognition as opposed to any other certification. So they are suggested, potential suggestions as well.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. And over to you, Kate.
Okay, so that was our last area in terms of our presentation. Have we missed anything? Is there anything that is in the policy that you would like to further explore tonight, or not in the policy that you would like some consideration in being included in the policy?
I think Councillor Doxey thinks you've missed something. Thank you, Councillor Doxey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not missed something, but something that could be added. Over my 8 years on council, I've been successful in pursuing a couple of issues, and thank you to the GM for this. We've got some skirt at the front of the council chamber. It took about 4 years to get there for a start, a modesty screen. We've repositioned the national flag and the state flag, and I'd like to see those repositioned to the centre up behind where the mayor sits. That happens in a normal council chamber or in a government office. It's an ugly sight behind that curtain. I think we could do something about that and more formalise this council chamber. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Doxey. And that would appear to be that item done with. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you.
It is now Lavington Sports Ground, expressions of interest for usage and events. Thank you, Ambrose.
Thank you, councillors, for the opportunity to provide an update on the Lavington Sports Ground expressions of interest. Firstly, just looking at what the purpose of the expression of interest, it was to seek interest in and proposals for events that are in line, event content that is in line with the facility's objectives. It was a transparent process for any clubs or organisations to express their interest, to confirm their usage expectations from the existing tenants, as well as to further promote that the redevelopment is nearing completion. What was the process that we ran through? So we advertised between late August for 4 weeks on the Albury City website, and we sent direct, the expression of interest was sent directly to 140 known user groups, including the existing user groups, other stakeholders and other organisations. 2 weeks prior to closing the expression of interest, we sent reminder notice to them, to each of those 140 user groups. We advertised in the Border Mail a couple of times, and we had quite an extensive social media campaign on both Facebook and LinkedIn. We reached 17,000 people. We had 3,200 engagement contacts. So that's reactions, shares, comments, clicks, etc. And on LinkedIn, we had 978 views and 26 likes. So we got quite a lot of engagement out there. The principles that we used for the EOI and particularly for the usage of the facility, just reminding the councillors that it was to maintain flexibility across the site for events and carnivals in particular, taking into consideration the conditions of the ground. We're very conscious of not overutilisation of the ground, recognising that for some major events, particularly at a national level or a state level, might take 4 or 6 weeks to prepare the ground. So we're very conscious of that, very conscious of the capacity of the facility, and we're guided by the existing hierarchy of use, albeit for the single ground that we've got at the moment, and how that would inform the new facility with the 2 grounds and the function rooms and et cetera, and the other elements of the facility that we've got. The number of submissions that we got was lower than what we expected, and our thoughts around this perhaps with the timing and a lot of the clubs and regional leagues and organisations, due to COVID-19, they're not meeting, they're not operating at the moment. In addition to that, many of the peak sporting bodies have had people stand down over this time period, and that's been well documented in the media. We recognise that this was the first approach that we had with the community, and although we were disappointed with the number of, it was below our expectations, the number of submissions, there has been a lot of direct engagement with a lot of these elite sporting bodies, and I'm very encouraged and excited by the plans that we're progressing at a local, regional, state and national level over the next 6 to 24 months in terms of the some of these peak sporting bodies and what they've got identified for the facility, which is exciting. But that wasn't reflected in the to a large extent in the submissions that we received. So just looking at the EOI submissions in a little bit more detail. So from the existing tenants, both the football and the cricket club were very keen to attract and facilitate events and carnivals, and very enthusiastic about working with council to maximise the facility. The cricket club have asked that the Lavington Sports Ground number 2 become their new home ground, and with access to ground number 1 for other cricket or Burundonga matches, and that's progressing. Both the cricket club and the football club have expressed a lot of interest in using the new function room, subject to fees and charges and the established conditions of use that we have in place. The cricket club suggested using the facility, the new function room, a couple of times per year, whereas the football club have expressed an interest in using it after each of their home matches. And as councillors would appreciate, if we can get some of the local sporting clubs using the facility, then that will generate further interest and success for private functions amongst our local community as well. In terms of additional ground usage and the facilities that are there, the Lavington Panthers Football and Netball Club have expressed an interest in using the away ground, noting that they, as part of the building that was undertaken, they've lost access to a operations meeting room as well as storage facility. And in order to maintain operations, and by that I mean coaches meetings, team selection, that type of stuff, they've requested that they have access to the existing away change room, and then when a Ovens and Murray game might be on, for example, the visiting club would use one of the 2 new change rooms in the new grandstand and potentially alternate every second week. So every 4 weeks they might play in one, and then every alternate 4 weeks they'll play in the other. And that would, we see that as quite favourable, because that way, the facility continues to get used, and there's no a long period of time where we're not actually using parts of the facility. We would and have already drafted up audits and checklists to make sure that if that were to occur, that we would conduct audits either on a Monday or certainly by Tuesday lunchtime of the facilities. Any damage that was incurred or something, or over the weekend, we would hold as part of the licence agreement the relevant club responsible for making good and addressing those concerns. Then from a junior football club perspective, the junior football club currently play across a number of grounds in within Albury, including Black Range, Norris Park and Urana Road. They've expressed an interest in consolidating the 3 junior boys clubs as well. This year they would have had 3 junior girls clubs. Teams, I should say, they're looking at consolidating all of those into the one location. It makes sense for as a parent to, if you have a boy and a girl playing at the same time, to get them at the same ground. Volunteers can then just be on one location and makes it more of a family venue for the junior football club, and we're certainly encouraged by that. We also had submissions from the non-tenants, including AFL New South Wales ACT and AFL North East Border, and both those organisations expressed interest in hosting carnivals for juniors, girls, states, and training academies, etc. So we're very encouraged by that, which is directly in line with the strategic objectives of the facility, promoting our visitor economy, etc. And finally, we had a expression of interest from the Lavington Panthers Ausclick Association, who currently play at Gelbart Park. They're looking to move from that facility in the future, albeit I got a number of concerns regarding overuse of the Lavington sports grounds if they were to use it on Saturday mornings as they currently play. Then leading into sport on Saturday afternoon and again on Sunday, we'd have some concerns with that, but we would be willing to consider for the 2 times when there is a large soccer event, gala day, etc., at Gelbart Park, we're very interested in perhaps trialling it for 1 or 2 times a year to accommodate their needs. So next, what are the next steps for us? We will respond to all the organisations who have submitted expressions of interest. We'll negotiate the new licence agreements and then finalise the marketing strategy, which is already well advanced, and develop our collateral and meet all the potential users and continue to actively promote our existing contacts, as well as continue those direct negotiations that we're having with a lot of the elite and peak sporting bodies.
Thank you, Ambrose. Yes, no surprise that you didn't get a large number of expressions of interest in the current climate. I mean, not very many, if any, community sporting clubs are currently competing. Lots of questions and comments. Councillor Glacken.
Thank you. Through you to the most relevant member of staff, Mr. Chair. I'm somewhat surprised that Cricket Albury Wodonga have not made some form of submission. I'm very conscious of the fact that the emphasis is to, in Albury Wodonga, is to continue to build cricket more physically in Wodonga, as in that be the home site. But noting the new facility at Lavington, I'm quite surprised that they have not made some form of submission or other, and wonder, is it possible for staff to be able to make a direct approach to them, especially noting that the build work in Wodonga has not yet commenced, etc., is my understanding. So I'm, if we could, wondering, is it possible to make some form of submission?
Thank you for the question, and through you, Mr. Chair, I agree. I will come back to you with a response from Cricket Albury Wodonga, but do note that they have been facilitating a lot of those discussions we're having directly with some of the peak sporting bodies, and we're very excited by some of those connections with the assistance of Cricket Albury Wodonga as well.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Glacken. Councillor King.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At getting an ambassador for the ground that's not a council staff member, but someone who's a high-profile local sporting identity that potentially would have the contacts through their sporting network, that we can actively go out and drag them out there to have a look and come and it doesn't have to be cricket or soccer; it can be anything sporting.
Great question. We have, as part of the opening plans, we have contacted some leading local sports people that would have used that facility in the past. For example, the current Australian and probably the next Australian cricket coach, was a local that obviously spent some time there, and we've contacted him, and although he can't make it to the opening for the facility, he's offered to provide a testimonial from Dubai. I think the Australian cricket team have got a tournament in Dubai in late November, so he won't be able to make it. But whether we'd have in place a formal arrangement for an ambassador, no, we haven't looked at that. Certainly good thank you for the suggestion.
Thank you, Councillor King. And yeah, I think it's not a bad idea. In fact, we've got plenty of local sporting identities, and I'm sure some of them would want to put their hands up for that as a possibility. Councillor Van der Ven.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. One of the things that was discussed early on with the redevelopment of the sports ground was the opportunity to have the administration of some of the major sports headquartered in the new building. Where is that particular process at? Has it been pursued, or just provide some information on where that's at?
Yeah, thank you for the question, and through you, Mr. Chair. I'm assuming specifically Ovens and Murray might be one that comes to mind. They've obviously got a lease arrangement at the moment. We're continuing having some discussion, but certainly we haven't formalised anything at all, and they've said that they're comfortable with their lease for the short time. We will continue to have those discussions, I guess.
There are, just to follow up, there are other major sporting leagues in the district, like the cricket and some of the other, sorry, we're not allowed to call it soccer anymore, football associations, those sort of places that it was thought that it would be a good space to have the administrations in that building. And I'm not sure what has been done in terms of the design of the building and the layout of the building to enable some of those organisations to have their headquarters in that space.
Thank you for the question. I'll make a formal response. If I could take that one on notice, please, and provide a detailed response to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Van der Ven. Any other comments or questions on that matter? No. Goodo. Thank you very much, Ambrose. So next item is corporate success pillars, enhanced environment. Stephen Millett. Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks for the opportunity to speak tonight just regarding a report that will be coming to Council next week in setting the carbon intensity targets. Sorry, is that still on? Yep. Just got to sit closer, sorry. Didn't want to yell at you. So just as background, so as you'd be aware, in 2019 and 2020, Council passed a number of motions that highlight a commitment to setting carbon targets and action on climate change. So within the 2019 motion, staff were tasked to set some ambitious yet achievable targets and to identify the actions that will be undertaken to achieve those, and also to address HVAC, heating, ventilation, air conditioning and cooling, and land use change, and to address some of the stuff that you see on the screen there with the impacts on climate change in the future. So just to give some background on how carbon intensity targets and the emission calculations are calculated, the sources of emissions can be categorised into three categories. So scope 1 emissions, emissions that are directly attributed to council activities, and they are from road transport, so our trucks and cars driving around, emissions from the Waste Management Centre, use of natural gas, the treatment of sewage, provision of water facilities. And they're also from the heating and ventilation and from changes in agriculture and land use change. So the calculations that you'll see later on in the presentation are based on the Federal Government National Greenhouse and Energy Reporting Act. And under these, you'll note that heating and ventilation and also land use change aren't actually, councils aren't actually required to report on these. So in the calculations that we have, we've actually taken these out, and we've also taken out scope 3 emissions, which are from third-party emissions from that. So sorry, just going back to scope 2. So scope 2 is from electricity. So that's electricity from our facilities and also from street lighting. And just to reinforce that we're only talking about emissions from Albury City activities. It's not from emissions from the general public or our community. So it's just from Albury City stuff. So just from these graphs, what you'll note is that the bulk of our emissions at present come from the Albury Waste Management Centre and also from electricity generation. So if we just take out the Waste Management Centre for a moment, the graph on the right just shows you electricity is then well and truly the next largest contributor. What the graph also shows is the orange or brown as it comes up there is the emissions from 2006-7, and then the blue is from 2018-19. So it's actually demonstrating that we've made significant reductions in that time. So, and that equates to actually a 28% reduction in that period. So we've made some really significant progress already. And the activities that we've undertaken to produce that really good outcome to date. The Hard Waste program and the Food Organics Garden Organic collection for households, they've been really significant contributors to reducing emissions from our landfill. Other activities that we've undertaken is the generation of electricity from biogas, or the collection of, and significant investment in solar, in changing our LED lighting to, changing our lighting over to LED, investment in energy efficient equipment with our wastewater and water activities. So we've done a really good job in that period. So challenges we have in setting targets, it's really easy to go out there and set the ambitious bit. So saying we're going to do this, we're going to do that, but then balancing it with that achievable notion is the real challenge that we have. Albury City, the amount of service that we actually provide versus other councils within the state and Australia. So we actually provide waste provisions, wastewater and water. Not all councils do that. So if you see other councils coming out and saying that we're net zero or we're carbon neutral, a lot of those councils won't actually provide the breadth of services that Albury City does. In our circumstance as well, we actually also provide waste services for 5 surrounding councils, and that's what you can see from the graph on the right there. Some other challenges is that the technologies available to reduce emissions over a long period of time, so those 2040, 2050. So they're actually not the things that we'll be doing in that period may not actually be viable at this point. So not everything that we're going to be able to do over the next 20 or 30 years is available today, or it may not be available in a cost-efficient manner. So you'd be aware that sort of in the last couple of years, we brought reports to council regarding the utilisation of batteries from solar. Those reports came back at that point that those technologies aren't quite ready to be used. Some other stuff is that the calculations and tools available for calculating our emissions. So the HVAC calculations where council isn't required to actually report on, like I said before, under the greenhouse emissions calculations, there's actually no tools at this point to actually report on them either. So another big challenge is actually the cost of offsets. So at any point in time, we could just go, let's go buy some offsets, and you could actually meet that target, but the actual cost for those is quite significant, and it takes you away from delivering other council services and perhaps other activities that would have a better impact on the environment as well. So if we went out today and...
Numbers are on the top of the bars, please.
Oh, that's just percentage. So Albury City waste is, that's the percentage of waste that goes in. So we're about 70% of all waste that goes to the landfill.
Going to the tip, so none of those other areas other than waste.
This graph here is just for the waste.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, sorry. So yeah, and with offsets, it's not just you go out and purchase an offset once, it's an offset every year. So it's an ongoing cost. So if we started purchasing offsets today, that would be cumulative up until, well, we'll just keep on going until we became carbon neutral without the purchase of offsets. So here's the targets that we've come up with, looking at that balance between being achievable yet ambitious. So you'll see here we've split it up with excluding waste and including waste. So essentially in the first 10 years, the targets are looking at reducing those emissions excluding waste, but it's very important that we also look at that longer term goal for that, what we'll look at net zero, including Albury City waste at 2040 and net zero, including all waste by 2050. So there's a balance between, okay, let's get some of these solar projects, reducing electricity utilisation in that short term, but we also, the bigger bang, like we're saying earlier, will come from that reduction of waste emissions. So we need to find that balance of doing both. So the actions to deliver on these targets, in this current financial year, we're doing a number of feasibility studies that will drive those future works programs. So looking at the expansion of the EV fleet. So here's Council's first electric vehicle that the Harve Waste team will be using. So we'll look at, okay, what's the feasibility of expanding our electric vehicle fleet, and then also taking it beyond the passenger fleet, putting it into our construction fleet as well. We'll continue our lighting projects. So lighting projects, we've just tonight, one of our project guys will be riding his push bike along the Thurgoona Albury Trail, where we've replaced 400 lights with LED lights, which also have sensors on them so that they'll dim down during the night when no one's using it. When they come up, they'll brighten up again. So we'll continue investment in that. Number of solar projects this year is the airport, Glen Echo, so we'll continue with those. And a major one that will contribute to those longer term targets, the construction of the material recovery facility at the Waste Management Centre, which will divert waste from landfill from the construction and demolition sector. So the future targets or future actions will just be that continuation of investment in solar, lighting and fleet. We currently have 2 years to run within our current energy provider. So we're actually going to a number of power purchase agreement sort of webinars at the moment, looking at what potential we have is to sign up to them. So that could be a combination of getting green power through those agreements and having that bulk purchase through New South Wales government sort of schemes and potentially private schemes, because there's private agreements out there as well. So we'll identify the best one of those to sign up to in the future. There's opportunities to convert our gas utilisation to electricity so that we're not using those with the use of electricity. You can offset that with solar. And then there's potential, even locally looking at that you could utilise the gas networks for hydrogen gas in the future. Really big thing in the future is our regional waste as well. So the continuation of collection of organics. So currently we do the household stuff really well, but going into that commercial sector as well so that they can divert the organics. That is the biggest thing that we need to focus on, is that diversion from waste. We're also playing a role in the regional waste area. So with providing that with Ramjo to other surrounding councils. Future actions with the HVAC and land use. So with land use, we're actually whilst we haven't been measuring it yet. We've purchased some GIS data from February this year, and then we'll periodically purchase data again so that we can actually model any loss of tree cover within our city and actually quantify that and put that into a carbon emission tracking as well. Other stuff we'll be doing is looking at energy efficiency of buildings. So any new build, we'll be looking at that. And then also looking at our procurement processes to include any energy efficiency or like a carbon price internally of our procurement practices as well. So look at ways of bringing that into our systems.
I think we hopped over refrigerants.
So just looking at replacing existing refrigerants which are contribute to our emissions with ones that don't, essentially, green refrigerants.
Thank you.
So the reporting, look, it's actually quite a difficult thing to report on because the number of calculations you've got in it and then the lag of the information. So what we'll be looking at doing is reporting through our council operational plan. There's a number of action plans that you would have seen in the past, the energy savings action plan that has a number of projects that we report back to council. Council's currently starting the climate change adaptation plan, which will, once again, we'll have actions that will relate to that. So we'll report back on those through reports to council. But so that we sort of have a shorter term sort of lead indicators, we'll look at tracking and reporting back on a 3-monthly basis, our utilisation of fuel, electricity and waste. So that will just give you an idea of how we're going. It doesn't directly track all of our carbon emissions, but it is a good indicator of how we're going to do it. So then annually, as part of our annual reporting processes, we'll come back with, okay, this is our carbon emissions for the year. Like I said, there is lag in this information. So we're collecting information on our electricity usage, calculating back from the Albury Waste Management Centre the amount of waste that's gone into landfill. So there is a little bit of lag with that information that'll come back, but it'll certainly be done on an annual basis. So just to summarise, look, we have made significant progress to date. So I think council should be proud of the efforts that they've put in over the last decade or so. Our major challenge is waste. Given that it's such a big proportion of the emissions that we have and that we do receive waste from other council areas. There's also the issue of legacy waste. So there's waste that we've already buried. So we can't change the emissions from those. Certainly with the collection of biogas and out the Waste Management Centre, they're actually using those, but we can't get away from the fact that we're generating emissions from that legacy waste. Like I said, there's evolving technologies. We'll need to keep up to date with what's available out there and also the change of measures. Something that I did sort of skip over without looking at my notes is that the measures, so on the 1st of July this year, they actually changed the way that you're reporting on the methane being emitted from the landfill. So just in the change of the calculations, the actual emissions that we'll be reporting will go up 12%. So that's just from a change of methodology. So the targets that I sort of put up earlier, they may have sort of seemed a little bit, oh, gee, they're not too ambitious, but overnight, those emissions have gone up 12% just because of the way that we're required to report on them. I think I mentioned the climate adaptation strategy already. So with all of these works, we'll be identifying projects to go into our forward works program, and that'll come to you through the budget process. Something that I'd like to just focus on to finish with is that the role that Albury City actually has in leadership and education in this space. So programs such as the community awareness program that's sort of driven by the Sustainability Advisory Committee through the environment team The Community Energy Fund, where council put in $100,000 for community groups to put solar on their facilities, and just education in general through sort of you supported other groups in education in the environment and sustainability space. These are all things that we do as a council that don't directly impact on the emissions that we'll be grading ourselves against. But they are bigger picture, probably going to make even more impact than some of the stuff that we do internally. So I'd like to encourage that any targets that we set, keep that in mind, and that we need to invest in reducing our emissions, but also educating our community so that they can do that as well. So I suppose that's about it. So there will be a more detailed report come to council next week. And any questions?
Thank you for that, Steve. Yes, in my short time on council, I've been very impressed by this council's efforts at energy reductions and climate change, and this is just further evidence of that. There are a number of questions and comments on the board. Thank you, Councillor Thurley.
Have you got any estimate of the legacy waste, what its trend into the future is? Like when do you expect that will come down to close to zero?
So look, I'm not sure if I've, through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not sure if I've got phone a friend up there, because I think Amber was potentially going to come in on Zoom, but
yes, I'm here.
Yeah, so there you go. I love it.
She's in the ceiling.
I haven't got it up in front of me at the moment, but if my memory serves me correctly, in about 2050, I think the legacy waste was going to be down to about 10,000 tonnes per annum.
Okay.
So it does, yes, it's trending downwards. Currently, it is above our non-legacy waste, so the waste that we've been burying the last few years. So it'll be about down to 10,000 in 2050, and at the moment, it's closer to, just give me 1 second. It's closer to about 70,000.
Okay.
Was that 30?
Ballpark.
So through you, Mr. Chair, there was about 70,000 currently. Yeah. So of total, so current emissions, I think is like 90,000. So 70,000 of that to legacy.
Councillor Van der Ven.
Look, I've got a few questions through you, Mr. Chair. First of all, under the targets, the 2050 target, I'm not sure what an emission reduction of 100% actually means. Does that mean we're back to zero?
So that means I said through you, Mr. Chair. I'm really bad at that. Apologies. So that basically means we're balanced. So like there's terms out there called carbon neutral and net zero. That's what people would call net zero, so that it's balanced. So in between reducing our emissions and also purchasing offsets at some point. So I'd suggest that there will be a point where to claim that net zero level, council will need to purchase offsets. That's why the targets in this first 10 years are really important, that we're reducing our emissions. So the focus really has to be on reducing emissions so that you don't have to purchase offsets. Because as I said earlier, once you get into the loop of purchasing offsets, you're doing that every year if you want to maintain that those claims.
Okay. I'd prefer that to be, reducing emissions by 100%. I don't think it's the right, I think we should be saying net zero on 18, 19 levels rather than 100% reduction in emissions. 100% reduction in emissions means zero. In my view, 100% is 100%, zero is zero. So anyway, look, it just doesn't gel right with me. Just to follow up through you, Mr. Chair, over the last few years, we've put a lot of solar onto our council buildings. Now we're using that solar internally to power our buildings. If there's any spare like if there's any excess generation, like we're not using the buildings on the weekends and things like that, is that going to the grid or is that going to other council facilities to use, for argument's sake, for our variable speed motors and those sorts of things? And then the other thing from my perspective is now that we're using the methane gas at the tip to generate electricity, surely there's a lesser carbon footprint now from that than there was beforehand. And we also now have like 3,000 solar panels out there that are generating electricity, even though the electricity is not going to us, or I don't think it is. Anyway, I don't think we have a purchase agreement with the people that are generating that solar electricity. So I'm just interested in trying to get the numbers around how much our legacy waste has been impacted by the usage of that methane gas that's generated at the Waste Management Centre and is now being converted into electrical power by, even though it's a third party.
So through you,
It's
Mr.
complex.
Chair, Mr. Chair, and just have my phone a friend in the background if I'm wrong. So my understanding is that we've handed over that to the third party, and our emissions are our emissions. So the solar has got nothing to do with council, so to speak, but so we don't get that. That's a third party. And also the biogas generation is handed over to them. So the emissions actually come out from us. So is that right, Amber?
Yeah, so we collect, the biogas is collected and transferred to LMS. So we get to account for the capture of that biogas. So rather than it being emitted up into the atmosphere, we report that it's been captured and transferred to that third party. So that is reducing our emissions at the landfill from that biogas and generation there. And in regards, sorry?
Yeah, keep going.
And in regards to the solar that we have installed on our premises, our tracking shows that we're using about close to 99% of what we generate, we are consuming ourselves at our own premises.
Yeah, okay. So well, what I was actually requesting was a quantum around that reduction in emissions from the Waste Management Centre. Like we're talking numbers, 70,000 tonnes of CO2. I would like at some stage, and I don't expect that answer tonight, but I'd like at some stage to get an idea of what that use of that biogas at the Waste Management Centre for generating electricity, what that has done to our reducing our carbon emissions in terms of tonnes that were thousands of tonnes per annum.
Yes, we can provide that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Question or comment from Councillor King?
Yes, Steve. You had a photo of our electric vehicle. Can you bring the slide up there? Is that the actual car?
That's the actual
Is it
car
in
in
the
the
picture?
basement. Yep. Just can't remember which way it was. No, went the wrong way. Sorry, guys.
There it is. There it is. There it is.
It's coming back.
So what, apart from being on display, what do we use that for?
So the Half Waste team will be using, through you, Mr. Chair, the Half Waste team will be using that for their education. So they'll take that out to schools and use it. So it'll actually be branded in the Half Waste.
So they're gonna put some vinyl wrapping or something on it.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what. Thought our little sticker there was a bit underdone.
No, that was just the first cut, just to brand it Albury City. So that, but yeah, so it's well and truly getting branded in the Half Waste plus Albury City logo.
Yeah, through Mr. Chair, we might add the introduction of our heavy fleet of electric diesel vehicles that's in train that we updated councillors on at the visit to the Smart Centre at the Resource Recovery Centre. And two things that we should also note in terms of the arrangement or the agreement with LMS Energy is that we do receive an annual royalty for in exchange for handing over the methane and the like, in the order of around $150,000 per year. And we do have access from the recent solar installation to the electric vehicle charging station at the Resource Recovery Centre that can charge these sorts of vehicles and any vehicles on the site out there that will be operational vehicles in the resource recovery setting. So that's the flip side in terms of financial benefit as opposed to reduction in carbon emissions, which we're touching on at the moment.
Thank you. Question or comment from Councillor Glacken?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, to the most relevant member of staff. Really to pursue the issue of the solar panels at the waste facility. So do we receive part of the 150,000 per year from that, or is that just from the methane? And just from the methane, thank you. And the other part is, do we get any benefit for having the solar panels on the waste site other than direct charging of vehicles that, for example, this one and then the future trucks, etc.? Is there any other benefit we get other than feel good because we did something good?
So all those things, including the feel good, and being one of the first councils in the state to implement that type of technology at a landfill in partnership with LMS. And that was when we discussed that partnership investment, I suppose you'd call it, at the time, they were the key drivers for that initiative.
Thank you.
Thank you. And another question or comment from Councillor Van der Ven.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just in terms of that 150,000, is that used, that money used to offset the costs of running the Waste Management Centre, or is it specifically hypothecated against further carbon reduction initiatives?
Any or all of those to do with the Resource Recovery Centre.
Right, thank you.
And just a question from me, not sure that you'll have the answer to hand, but happy to take it on notice. A couple of years ago, we voted as a council to set up a compost facility, I think out at the water treatment plant. And I think it ran into problems, as I recall, with PFAS. And the whole thing, the last time I heard, got suspended. I'm just wondering where we're at with that composting facility and if it's showing any signs of life.
Thank you for the question for you, Mr. Chair. I'll just have to take on notice and get back to councillors on the status of that.
Okay, thank you for that. I would look forward to seeing that answer at some stage. I think we're done on the enhanced environment presentation. Thank you, Steve. Now, the moment we've all been waiting for, it's Mr. Finlayson. He's going to talk to us for 10 minutes on the draft delivery program preparation review.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, councillors. So it's that time of year again to start planning for the next preparation of our delivery program and reflect on how it went last time around and whether there's any improvements that can be made. So I've just got a brief presentation to work through just to recap on the key elements last time around, and then keen for feedback on how we can further improve the process. There we go. So the presentation covers the integrated planning and reporting framework, which we abide by, the preparation timetable and potential opportunities to improve and next steps. So the integrated planning and reporting framework, which is embedded in the Local Government Act, at its heart has the community strategic plan, which we aspire to deliver on utilising our 4-year delivery program. And then the first year of our delivery program is the operational plan. So the delivery program and operational plan, they draw upon both the community strategic plan, but also other strategies, whether that's of council or of government, but also other priorities identified during the process. So last time around, we had a number of workshops. In November, we presented strategic priorities received by councillors to the briefing session. Then we came back to councillors in the February briefing session, articulating how we propose to progress those priorities. And then from that feedback, we incorporated that into the larger new initiatives and budget process and reflected that as part of the whole. We also presented information regarding financial assistance requests, proposed fees and charges, rates, revenue and payroll expense. And then in April, we presented then operational plan activities, which includes how we're progressing actions of the operational plan with our internal resources, and then our operating budget, long-term financial plan, and any responses to additional questions received from councillors from that March briefing session. So from all of that, we then progressed into the more formal part of the process, which is the presentation of the draft budget documents to council in April and getting that endorsement to present to the community, a number of community engagement sessions led by the CEO, and then a closing date for submissions, which are then analysed and presented to council for consideration for final adoption at its meeting in June. So some issues that we've been reflecting on and also posed them for councillor feedback is how well did the delivery program as presented to council in April reflect both the community and the councillors' priorities? And then from that, the strategic priority setting process that we've been updating each year, did it work better than it had in previous years? Can it be improved further? How do we continue to have both individual input but also whole of councillor group input? Other issues and opportunities include how to, are the briefings that the councillors receive, the information received, are they hitting the mark? Is our delivery progress reporting after adoption hitting the mark regarding informing both councillors and the communities on our progress? And are there any other suggestions that councillors may have on how we can improve that preparation process? So as I said, it's a process that's been developed over a number of years, working from the community strategic plan. I'm keen to capture any thoughts and ideas councillors have this evening before we recommence the process and seek input from councillors on what your priorities may be. And then we'll present those to councillors at the next briefing session in November. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that short, sharp presentation, Mr. Finlayson. We have a question or comment from Councillor Doxey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Justin, I think the process has worked well in the last 12 months in particular. We've made some little tinkering with it. But the thing that I want to see stopped is this last minute ambushes when it's come to a budget and people want to see a change. We must think these things through before we get to that stage.
I'm not sure that there was a question there or whether it was just a comment, but I seem to recall the situation that Councillor Doxey is alluding to, and I think it was pretty clear that it wasn't an ambush. So perhaps that was a very colourful term to use to describe what actually happened. Any other questions or comments on this draft delivery program preparation review? I think it was only a couple of months ago, Councillor Glacken. There is a light on it, Councillor Thurley.
I'll just make the same comment that the first comment that Councillor Doxey made, that the process this year was much better than in previous years, and I think it drew out a lot of feedback and input from councillors. So I'd like to proceed along the same lines.
I also thought that it worked pretty well, and I did especially like the way that some input from residents and ratepayers translated into action in the delivery program pretty quickly. I'm thinking about things like the unsealed roads seem to happen very quickly and efficiently. Any other comments before we move to the next item? Thank you,
Mr. Chair, if I can just add, if there are any thoughts councillors have at any time, happy to receive those via email and incorporate those into the process.
Good. Now, are there any items of general business?
Can we attend to an operation matter?
Yes, why not? It's okay. It's only a workshop, Councillor Becken. It's closed, but I did wonder if we're having the police, or is that a separate one? Yep, great. Thanks. Closed at 7:35. Yep.
Did we stop broadcasting? Yes, we have.
Brad?